Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Welcome to another lecture, and in today's class we are going to do the first chapter of your book, the name of which is Rip Van Winkle. Now before we begin with the chapter, let us discuss about the author of this chapter. Now this chapter is written by Washington Irving. He was born in the year 1783 and died in the year 1869. Now, Irving was an American author, he was an essayist, he was a biographer, he was a historian, and he was known for his stories, Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of the Sleepy Hollow. Now, both these stories were a part of the book, the name of which was The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon. Now, George Washington, Oliver Goldsmith, Muhammad, and several historians of the 15th century, Washington Irving had written their biographies and was very famous for that. Moreover, he was dealing with a lot of subjects. When he was in Spain, he had written about various important subjects when he was writing and when he had that flair for writing. Now, this story that we are going to read, Rip Van Winkle, is a very strange and obviously this is a fiction that we are going to read. What we will be reading does not hold true in reality and can never hold true as well. Because we shall be reading about this man named Rip Van Winkle, who was very lazy, who had a very good rapport with the kids of his village. He was known to be a very affectionate, a very helpful man, a very kind-hearted man. He could never say no to anyone. But one day he went on to the hill and he drank something which made him sleep for 20 years. After he woke up, now 20 years later when he had woken up, he came back to his village and obviously those 20 years had changed everything. Nobody remembered him. The dogs who used to be friendly to him earlier were now barking at him. The kids who used to play with him, who used to tease him because they knew he would never mind, now failed to recognize him as well. So what is this story actually about? Let us read in detail. But before we begin with the story, you all can see this warm-up exercise which is given on the top of your page. You are given with 3 pictures. The first one says, Rip is a simple man. The second says, he sleeps for 20 years. And the third one says, he wakes up to a new world. Now the author has asked us a few questions. What do you think made Rip sleep? What do you think will happen when he returns to his village? What should Rip do so that the people recognize him? And would you like to be in Rip's place? Why or why? So in order to get the answers to these questions, we'll have to read this very interesting story. So without wasting much time, let us start reading. Okay. At the foot of the Catskill Mountains was a village. In this village lived a simple, good-natured fellow by the name of Rip Van Winkle. He was a good man and a kind neighbor. The children of the village would shout with joy whenever he approached. He helped them at sports, made their playthings, taught them to fly kites and shoot marbles, and told them long stories. Whenever he went about the village, he was surrounded by a troop of them, hanging on to his skirts, clambering on his back and playing 1,000 tricks on him. He was such a friendly man that not even a dog would bark at him. So, at the foot of the Catskill Mountains was a village. So, the name of the mountain is Catskill Mountain, and at the foot of that mountain, that means the foothills of the mountain, was a village. And in that village, there lived a man whose name was Rip Van Winkle. He has been described as a very simple man who was good-natured. He had a wonderful nature. He was a very kind-hearted man. He was a good man and a kind neighbor. So not only was he a very nice person, but he was a very good neighbor also. The children of the village would shout with joy whenever he approached whenever he would come nearer. Whenever they would see him coming to them, the children used to become very happy. They used to become thrilled with excitement and they used to cry. They used to shout his name. He helped them at sports. So when it was some playing that they were involved with, he used to help them. Made their playthings. Playthings means their toys. So he used to help them make toys, taught them how to fly kites and shoot marbles. And he also told them long stories. Whenever he went about the village, he was surrounded by a troop of them. Troop means a group of children. So whenever he would go near the village, there were always a lot of children who used to hang on to him, who used to surround him, hang on to his skirts. Skirts means the bottom. Whatever he used to wear, the lowers, they used to hang on to his lowers. He used to all used to hold him very tight, clamber on his back. They used to climb on his back and play 1,000 tricks on him. And they would actually play a lot of games on him. They used to tease him in one way or the other. He was such a friendly man that not even a dog would bark at him. Dogs, we all know, usually bark at people who are strangers. But no dog would ever bark at Rip Van Winkle. He would never refuse to give a helping hand to a neighbor, even in the most difficult tasks. The women of the village too had to employ him to run their errands. In fact, Rip was ready. So, Rip was ready to help everybody, but his only problem was that he was lazy and hated work. He would sit on a wet rock with a rod as long and heavy as any rod can be and fish all day. He would carry a light gun on his shoulder and spend hours in the woods to shoot a few squirrels or wild pigeons. So, he would never refuse to give a helping hand. Give a helping hand means to offer help. So he never refused. He never said no to anyone for help, to a neighbor, even in the most difficult tasks. Even if the work that the neighbors were asking him to do was a very difficult one, but he would never say no to them. The women of the village too used to employ him to run their errands. Now, whatever work, small work, errands means the small work, the activities, day-to-day activities. So the women of the village too used to request Rip Van Winkle to help them with their day-to-day work. And in fact, Rip was ready to help everyone. He used to help everyone. The only problem that he had was that he was very lazy and he did not like to work. He would sit on a wet rock. So if there was a rock, he would sit on that rock. He had a very long and a very heavy fishing rod with himself and he would fish all day. Other than that, he would carry a light gun on his shoulder. So a very light-weighted gun he would carry on his shoulder. And he used to spend hours in the woods. Woods means forest. So he used to spend a lot of time in the forest to shoot whatever few squirrels or the wild pigeons he would come across. It felt it was of no use to work on his farm. His fences were always falling to pieces. His cow would either go astray or get among the cabbages. Weeds grew in his fields. Compared to those of his neighbors, his farm was worst off. So according to him, working on the farm, working in the fields was something which was of no use at all. His fences, now we all know what fences are. Those wooden fences, that we put around the farm so that the wild animals cannot come in. So he did not pay much of an attention to his farm. And how do we know that? Because his fences, as the writer tells us, they were always falling to pieces. They were always broken. Okay, they were not mended. They were not taken care of properly. His cow would either go astray. They would just roam around anywhere and everywhere. Or they would go among the cabbages. We all know cabbage is a vegetable. So the cows would either roam about anywhere or they would enter the farm which was filled with cabbages. Weeds grew in his fields. What are weeds? Weeds mean the unwanted plants. Now usually what do we grow in the field? We grow some sort of a seed. Some seed is sown. Vegetables, fruits are grown in the field. But his field, his farm was not taken care of, and therefore there were weeds which used to grow rather than some seeds being sown. And as compared to the farm of his neighbors, his farm was the worst off, his farm was the worse than anybody else. His children too were ragged and wild as if they belonged to nobody. It was for this that his wife, Dame Van Winkle, kept continually reminding him about his idleness and his carelessness. Morning, noon and night she would scold him. Rip's one way of avoiding her wrath was to take the gun in hand and stroll away into the woods. His dog, Wolf, would follow him. In the woods, he would sometimes seat himself at the foot of a tree and share his grief with Wolf. So, his children too were as ragged and wild as if they belonged to nobody. Ragged means they used to wear clothes which were torn. And they were very wild. Wild means they were very ill-mannered. They were not good-mannered kids. They did not know how to behave. They did not know what manners and etiquettes were. And it seemed that the kids did not belong to anyone. It means that it was very evident after looking at the kind of kids that he had that, he did not take very good care of his kids also. And it was for this reason that his wife, whose name was Dame Van Winkle, she kept on reminding him continuously how idle he was. Idle means somebody who's always free. So that he was very free, he did not do anything, and he was very careless as well. He did not pay much attention to work. Morning, noon and night she would scold him. So the whole day she would keep on scolding him. And the only way Rip had to avoid her wrath means anger. So the only thing Rip did so as to make sure that he does not have to face the anger of his wife the whole day, what did he do? He used to take the gun in his hand and stroll away into the woods. Stroll away, just walking aimlessly. Okay, when you're just walking in the garden, there is no hurry, there is no place for you to go, you're just walking yourself. So he used to go into the forest. His dog, whose name was Wolf, would always follow him, would always go behind him. In the forest, he would sometimes seat himself at the foot of a tree. So when he would go to the forest, he would sometimes sit on the foot, at the bottom of the tree, and would share his sadness. He would share his sadness with his dog Wolf, because this clearly shows he had nobody else he could confide in rather than his dog. Wolf was Rip's sole companion at home. Dame Van Winkle regarded them as companions in idleness. Wolf was a courageous dog, but the moment he entered the house, his face fell, his tail drooped to the ground or curled between his legs. When Dame Van Winkle flourished a broomstick or ladle, he would run to the door yelping. So, Wolf was Rip's sole companion. Sole means only. Companion means friend. So, the only friend that Rip had was Sole. And Dame Van Winkle, that is Rip's wife, according to her, Wolf and her husband were companions in idleness. They were friends of being, they were friends who were always free. So since they both had nothing to do at all, thus they used to spend the whole time together. Now Wolf was a very courageous dog. Courageous, very strong. He was a very strong dog. But the moment he would enter the house, so outside the house he was very courageous, he was very strong. But the moment he would enter the house, his face fell, he became very sad. Falling face is an indication of being sad. So his face fell, he would become sad. His tail drooped to the ground. Drooping means falling. So his tail would fall to the ground or curled between his legs. Curl is to change its shape. So it used to curl down between his legs. And when Dame Van Winkle flourished a broomstick or a ladle. Broomstick, what we use to clean the house, and ladle is something that is used for cooking. We've seen our mothers using ladle in the kitchen whenever some sort of a vegetable or anything is made. We have to stir the things using a ladle. So whenever Dame Van Winkle would show a broomstick or a ladle to Wolf, he would run to the door yelping. Yelping means crying. You all can imagine the cry of a dog. So he would cry and would run to the door. One day, to escape his wife's rage, Rip walked away to one of the highest parts of the Catskill Mountains. Panting and exhausted, he lay on the grass in the shady woods. For some time, Rip lay there, but as he was about to descend, he heard a voice from a distance. Rip Van Winkle, Rip Van Winkle. He looked round, but could see nothing but a solitary crow flying across the mountain. He turned again to descend when he heard someone call his name again. At the same time, Wolf gave a low growl. Rip looked in the same direction and saw a strange figure slowly climbing up the rocks and bending under the weight of a can that he carried on his back. Rip quickly went to help. So one day, in order to escape, to run away from his wife's anger. Rage means anger. So in order to run away from his wife's anger, Rip walked away to one of the highest parts of the Catskill Mountains. So he went on to the top of the Catskill Mountains. When he walked till there, he was obviously panting. Panting means breathing very heavily. Imagine yourself running or walking for a very long duration and for a very long distance as well. You are going to be breathing very heavily. So that is panting. And exhausted means tired. So he was tired, he was panting, and he lay on the grass in the shady woods. So on the top of the mountains, he entered a forest. In that forest, there was a part which was shady. Shady means which was covered with the trees, and he lay down on that grass. Obviously, he was tired. For some time, Rip lay there, but as he was about to descend, so for some time, Rip continued to be there, but when he was about to descend means come down from the hill, he heard a voice from a distance. So he could hear someone calling him from a distance, and he heard his name being called, Rip Van Winkle, Rip Van Winkle. He looked round, but could see nothing but a solitary crow flying across the mountain. So he looked to see who was calling his name, and he saw that there was nothing but a solitary, there was a single crow that he could see flying in the mountains. He turned again to descend. So when he thought that probably he was mistaken, that somebody is calling his name, so he again turned so that he could come down the mountains, when he heard someone call his name again. At the same time, Wolf gave a low growl. Growl is the sound that a dog makes, okay? So at that time, when somebody called Rip's name again, his dog Wolf, he started growling. Rip looked in the same direction and saw a strange figure slowly climbing up the rocks. So he looked into the same direction from which he heard the sound, and he saw a strange figure. Strange figure means a strange looking man was climbing up the rocks and bending under the weight of a can that he carried on his back. So there was a can that the man was carrying on his back, and he was bent. Obviously, since the can was very heavy, so he was bent with the weight of that can. Rip quickly went to help him. So the moment Rip saw that man, he ran so as to help him. He saw that the stranger was a short old fellow with thick bushy hair and grizzled beard. He was dressed in the very old Dutch fashion. He was wearing a pair of breeches decorated with rows of buttons down the sides. He carried on his shoulder a stout keg that seemed full of liquor, and made signs for Rip to help him with the load. As usual, Rip was ready to help. Rip carried the keg for him. Both of them climbed up quietly. So, he saw that stranger who was carrying the can was a short fellow, and he was very old as well. He had thick bushy hair, so his hair was very thick, and his beard was grizzled. Grizzled means it was turning grey, it was turning white. He was dressed in the very old Dutch fashion. So the kind of clothes that he was wearing were very old-fashioned clothes. He was wearing a pair of breeches. Now, what are breeches? Obviously, they are short pants which, cover your hips and your thighs, and they are there above your knees. Okay, so sort of short pants we can call. So, he was wearing breeches decorated with rows of buttons down the sides, and the breeches on both the sides, the breeches was decorated by a row of buttons. He carried on his shoulder a stout keg. Stout means very fat. Keg means a barrel. Barrel is a kind of a can, a wooden canister which is used for storing liquid in it. And he was carrying that very big, very fat keg, and it seemed that it was full of liquor. That barrel was filled with alcohol, and that strange man made signs for Rip to help him with the load. So that man wanted help from Rip Van Winkle, And as always, Rip could not say no. So Rip carried that keg on his shoulder and he, along with that man, climbed up the hill very quietly. Together they reached a place where there were odd-looking persons playing ninepins. They were dressed strangely like the man who had got Rip there. Their faces too were peculiar. Then one had a large beard, broad face and small eyes. The face of another had a big nose. They all had beards of various shapes and colors. There was one who seemed to be the commander. He was a stout old gentleman and he wore a broad belt and hanger, high-crowned hat and feather, red stockings and high-heeled shoes, with roses in them. What seemed very odd to Rip was that, though these people were having fun, their faces were very serious. They played in complete silence. The only sound was the noise of the balls, which, whenever they were rolled, echoed along the mountains like rumbling of thunder. So, together, Rip and that strange-looking man, they reached a place where there were odd-looking people, strange-looking people were there. And what were they playing? They were playing ninepins. As you can see in the picture, in the modern day we call this game as bowling. So we have those 9 pins and with the help of a ball you have to make sure that all the pins fall down in one go. So they were playing 9 pins. They were dressed strangely like the man who had got Rip here. So the dressing sense of that strange looking man with whom Rip had gone up the mountain and those people were the same. Their faces too were peculiar. Peculiar means strange. So their faces also were very strange. One had a large beard, broad face and small eyes. So now the writer is giving us a description of those people. One man had a large beard, a very large beard. He had a very big face and very small eyes. The face of another had a big nose. There was other man who had a very big nose on his face. They all had beards of various shapes and colors. Each man had a beard and the beard was of different shape and color. There was no one who seemed to be the commander. So there was nobody who, according to Rip, was the commander, who was the head of that group. There was one who, according to Rip, was the head, the commander of that group. And this man was a stout gentleman. He was a fat old gentleman and he wore a broad belt and hanger. Hanger is a kind of cloth, which has an elastic to attach to the trousers that you are wearing. So he wore a broad belt, a very big belt. There was hanger onto his clothes. He had high crowned hat. So he was wearing a hat which had a very high crown. Okay. And feather and red stockings. So his hat had feathers onto it. He was wearing red color stockings, the long socks that we have. And he had high heeled shoes with roses in them. So the shoes had roses in them. What seemed very odd to Rip was that though these people were having fun, their faces were very serious. So the only thing that Rip thought was the strangest was the fact that although those people were having great fun, but their faces were very serious. There was no smile, there was no expression of having fun on their faces at all. They played in complete silence. Again, a very strange thing. When we are playing, the first thing that lets you know that somebody is playing is the noise, the shout that you can hear of the people with excitement. But these people were playing totally silently. There was complete silence. The only sound was the noise of the balls, which, whenever they rolled, echoed among the mountains like the rumbling of thunder. The only sound that came was the sound of the balls. So whenever they would throw the ball would roll, the sound of the ball would echo. It would spread across the mountain and could be heard, just like the rumbling of thunder. When there is a thunder in the sky, just the way you can hear the thunder all around you, it echoes, the sound of the thunder travels. Similarly, one could hear the sound of that ball. As Rip and his companion approached them, they suddenly stopped from their play and stared at them with a fixed statue-like gaze. Rip's companion put the contents of the keg into large glasses. He asked Rip to drink it. Rip obeyed with fear and saw that the other men also had their drink and returned to their game. Rip was thirsty and liked the drink, so he drank a few glasses and fell into a deep sleep. So, when Rip and his companion, now who is this new companion whom we are talking about? That strange man along with whom Rip had come onto the top of that mountain. So, when they approached them, when these two people had gone nearer to them, they stopped from playing and they started staring at him. Staring means looking at somebody continuously. So they were staring at him like a fixed statue-like gaze. Just the way a statue will always keep on looking at you. A statue is obviously a non-living thing. You cannot expect a statue to blink the eyes. So that way the people kept on looking at both of them. Rip's companion put the contents of the keg into large glasses. So the man who was there with Rip, he put the content of the keg. So what was there in the keg? There was liquor. So that man put liquor in large glasses and he gave it to everyone. He asked Rip also to drink it and Rip obeyed him. Rip listened to him because he was scared. He did not know that should he say no to them or not, and saw that the other men also had their drink and returned to game. So he saw that the others had also, they drank whatever the man had given to them and they went to play again. Now Rip was obviously thirsty. He had been climbing the mountain since a very long time and he liked the drink also. So he drank a few glasses where the other men drank only one glass. Rip drank a few glasses and then he fell into a deep sleep. So he slept. How deep was the sleep? We will read that. When Rip woke up, he found himself alone. He rubbed his eyes. It was a bright sunny morning. The birds were hopping and twittering about the bushes in the pure mountain breeze. Surely, thought Rip, I have not slept here all night. What excuse shall I make to Dame Winkle? So when Rip woke up, he saw that he was alone. There was nobody around him. He rubbed his eyes and he saw that the day was a very bright sunny day. He could see the birds hopping, jumping. So he could see the birds jumping and twittering. Twittering is the sound of the birds that can be heard. So he could hear the birds, he could see the birds among the bushes in the pure mountain breeze. Breeze, the wind. The mountain breeze, we usually call it because we all know that the wind, the fresh and pure wind that one can experience in the mountains cannot be experienced anywhere else. Rip thought that surely I have not slept here all night. So he was just praying, he was just hoping that he did not sleep there the whole night. And he started wondering, What excuse was he going to give to his wife, Dame Van Winkle, for not returning home the whole night? He looked round for his gun and saw in place of the clean, well-oiled gun an old rusted one lying next to him. Wolf too had disappeared. He whistled after him and shouted his name, but no dog was to be seen. As he rose to walk, he found it difficult to get up. With some difficulty, he got down into the glen, but the things seemed to have changed in one night. He felt very hungry, but dreaded to meet his wife, wondering what Dame Van Winkle would say. He started walking homewards. So he looked around to see his gun, and he saw that in place of his gun, which was very clean, it was very well-oiled gun, what did Rip see? Rip saw an old gun which was rusted. Rusted, we all know that iron gets rusted because of the passage of time, so the gun was rusted and it was lying next to him. Wolf, his dog, too had disappeared. He was nowhere to be seen. He whistled after him. Whistling, we all know. So he whistled after his dog. He called his name, but he was nowhere to be seen. As he rose to walk, so he decided that he is going to get up and will come down from that place. So it was very difficult for him to get up. With some difficulty, he got down into the glen. Glen means valley. So from the top of the mountain, he came down into the valley. But things in the valley had changed in one night. He felt very hungry, obviously, but dreaded to meet his wife. He was afraid to meet his wife. He was wondering, he was thinking what his wife would say that he did not return home the last night.